Thank you guys very much for coming and giving up your Friday evening to be here as well. So how tonight will work, we set up a survey via SurveyMonkey, and all the questions were collected and grouped into specific categories. We then merged all the questions in those categories and chose the top 5 and sent those questions to all the candidates running and collected their responses. If there is time at the end of the night, we will open questions to the floor. So please, I ask you to be respectful. I can do that. So please be respectful of our candidates. No heckling, no finger pointing, singling out anyone, blaming. This goes for candidates as well. So we have 3 minutes each, up to 3 minutes. They don't have to talk for that long. Go for it, James. Thank you.
Thanks, Kylie, and thanks for putting this event on as well. It's very good of you. And thanks everyone for coming and giving your Friday late afternoon off. My name is James Carpenter. I've lived in Broome for 14 years now. I am in love with the place, and I grow more in love with the place the longer I'm here. I'm running for Shire Council this year because I'm big onto the environment. I believe that every level of government requires emergency action in regards to climate action and how we treat the environment. And I think that as a councillor, I'll bring a focus on the environment to all that we do. I've been involved in a number of different organisations over my time. I'm a passionate cricketer, and I was the chairman of the Broome Cricket Association for a long time. I'm the president of the Men's Outreach Service for 5 years and saw that service grow, working with some of the most difficult members of our community. And I've worked in the Department for Child Protection for 12 years, where I worked across the Kimberley with welfare organisations where we tried to help people who aren't as privileged as most of us to have a good life. So, you know, I'm deeply ingrained in the community. I certainly enjoy my role and my position here, and I'm looking forward to representing everyone here.
I don't profess to have all of the answers. Yes, I have ideas of my own, which I will share with you tonight. But I'm all ears, and I would like to hear from you also. Ideas, not just complaints, but possible solutions, options. We aren't always going to agree, but at least we can have a healthy, civilised discussion. What I have to offer you is to be an accessible Shire councillor who will be open, transparent, and a genuine grassroots community voice. I'm offering you, the people of Broome, a real alternative, not one that some might characterise as from the conservative right or loony left, half crazy with half-baked ideas or whatever labels, but an alternative that listens to our diverse community, that will bring sustainable development to Broome, development which will be considered through multiple lenses: social, cultural, environmental and economic, not just one. Your vote is precious and valuable. Don't store it away for another day. Use it wisely. Ngaji Gurijan. Good evening. My name is Tony Lee, born and raised here in Broome. My mother's family have lived here for thousands of generations. And my father was one of the Japanese hard hat pearl divers. I currently work as a career advisor at the Jobs and Skills Centre and also do casual work at the North Regional TAFE Broome campus. I've worked as a native title mediator and negotiator in senior management in the WA Public Service, and an advisor to 4 Western Australian government ministers, one who became Premier. I've worked as the CEO for the not-for-profits, operated my own consulting business, and have actively volunteered. I'm currently the chair of Muggaballa Books and a member of BRAM's, Broome Regional Aboriginal Medical Services Consumer Advisory Committee, and a member of the First Nations LGBTIQ+ Advisory Group to Sydney World Pride 2023. My biggest passions is fishing here in Broome, for salmon during the dry season and bluebone in the wet season, when both fish are fat. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Might be a bit different and stand if that's okay. I feel a bit more comfortable public speaking while standing, which is possibly a bit weird. I'm Ellen Smith, and the reason I'm running for council is because I'm frustrated that the current leadership in our shire continues to single-mindedly prioritise large construction projects for Broome. I want to see expenditure by the shire which has a greater balance towards the priorities of our community. This includes youth services and facilities, community safety and security, and safe boat launching facilities. I believe in our community and that as a collective we have the tools to solve the priorities we identify. With the right leadership, we can bring our community together to solve our common problems. I moved to Broome with my husband Ross and our dog Salty for a 12-month contract at the Department of Fisheries, and that was 6 years ago. And I think that's a really common story among the people who now call Broome home. This place gets under your skin. It's because of the spirit that is woven in through the land and the community who welcome newcomers with generous hearts. I grew up on the lands of the Menang Noongar people in Albany on the south coast, and I've always had a love for the ocean and the natural environment. I'm a curious person and I love new experiences and learning new things. Education is really important to me, and like many country kids, I had to make the move to Perth to further my studies. I am driven by science and a pragmatic approach to challenging issues. I've studied a Bachelor of Aquatic Science and Coastal Zone Management, and I've also completed a Master's in Public Policy and Management, which gave me critical thinking skills and the ability to interrogate decisions which shape our society. Across uni and my first real job, I lived in Perth for 8 years, though I'd realised well before that regional WA is where my heart lies. It's the people of regional WA that make it what it is, which is why I believe it's so important that our town of Broome reflects the priorities of the people who live here. With the right leadership, we can shape a town in which we all feel safe and proud to call home. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen.
Good evening. My name is Peter Taylor. For those that don't know me, I'm a current councillor. I'm at the end of my first 2-year term, and hopefully I'm going to get a second term. I came to Broome nearly 30 years ago. I've always lived north of 26 Parallel. Essentially before I came to Broome and after Broome, I worked in the mining industry in various places across the Pilbara and across the Kimberley. And that's given me a really good understanding, I think, of regional Australia and some of the problems of regional Australia. I came to Broome because I thought it was probably one of the best places that I'd ever come to. I was in the Pilbara for a long time and came up here for long weekends and holidays there, and it became my goal to actually move here with my young family then and make Broome our home for life. 30 years later, I have daughters that are still in Broome, and I have 3 grandchildren now. So there's, I guess, 3 generations of the Taylors now living in Broome. Now, some people might not think that's a good idea, but we're really happy about that. I started taking an interest, particularly in local council, about 10 years ago when I first semi-retired. And there was clearly lots missing in this town at that stage. There was really very little, I think, vision to go forward. There didn't seem to be the energy and the planning to actually move Broome, what I think needed to move forward in a way that I think I and a lot of the people that I know thought was necessary. At that stage, there were very poor relations with state and federal government, and Broome was considered a bit of a basket case in terms of its governance at that stage. I started really taking an interest too in council about 6-7 years ago, and I was, I guess, one of the few people that regularly turned up to council meetings to actually try and understand what was going on, and perhaps what were some of the deficiencies in what were happening
30
there.
seconds, Peter.
And look, from there, I decided 2 years ago that I had the time, I had the energy, and I had the experience there, and the practical experience to make a contribution to decision making going forward. So at that point, with 8 seconds, thank you very much for coming tonight and the opportunity to answer some questions. Thanks.
Hello, my name's Phil Matsumoto. I'm representing the Dampier Peninsula and Coconut Well, Milyamara in the outside ward. I'm standing for re-election. I've been on council for a long time, but in the last 4 years, I think councils have achieved a lot of things and delivered to the community of Broome a lot of infrastructure places, such as the Town Beach development, the Chinatown development, and what's next on the agenda is the Cable Beach development. I know that the Cable Beach development has got a lot of, will have a lot of people against it, and I think we need to really focus on what sort of infrastructure we're going to put in there, and I would like to see as many people, when they have a look at the plans of the stuff, to discuss it and come back to council and have a look and see what we can change in that area. The other thing is that in the Dampier Peninsula area, I know that local government doesn't provide adequate service to them, and if I get in, I will advocate to the rest of the council, but also to government and state government, local government, federal government, to provide services to those communities. And on top of that, the local government, the Broome Shire, should be also supporting them in their infrastructure and all the other stuff that we in the Broome Shire gets. And that's my forte, and that's what I'll be doing for those peninsula communities.
Thanks, James, Tony, Ellen, Peter, and Philip. Thank you, guys. As I mentioned earlier, we chose 5 popular topics. Crime and safety came in with 19 responses out of the 37 that we received through the survey. So that's obviously going to be our first question that we asked tonight. The question is, what real practical things are you going to introduce to reduce crime in Broome? We have Elise here as well, who's actually going to be reading Harold and Desiree's responses out. So if we want to start with James, do you want to start with that one? Yep.
Thanks for the question, Kylie. I don't think there's any point in blaming state and federal governments for not supporting us in dealing with youth crime. I think the Shire can have a positive influence on how we deal with this. I look at other shires and other shires in the Kimberley who've made a huge effort in reducing their youth crime through the implementation of programs that are based upon the idea of justice investment. So that's the idea where instead of paying downstream lots of money to build prisons and to incarcerate people, that we use the money that could have been spent in that in doing programs that can actually stop people from getting into crime in the first place. So I've brought a little document here which I'm happy to leave for people to have a look at here, where the Shire of Halls Creek have proactively gone out and through philanthropy and engagement with government agencies have created a program like youth engagement night officers, a guaranteed traineeship for the Shire for every high school graduate, learning on country coordinators to lead development and culture secure youth rehabilitation and education models, free entry to the pool, intensive case management, Aboriginal parent support teams to help people in their family homes, and early childhood intervention initiatives. These have all been done by the Shire, and yet all we hear is that this isn't the Shire's responsibility. So I'm saying that it is. It's something we can do, and there are practical models led by much smaller, less rateable Shires than ours that can do something about it. I also think that in the West, I know that in the West Kimberley there's other programs run by CALAC, who's a leading cultural organisation in the area.
30 seconds, James.
Who have a program called the Yearaman Project, and they're trialling a Yearaman Women's Project, which actively takes young people out on country to learn the respect and self-esteem from their elders so that they can come back to town different people. We need to try this, and we need to make this happen. Thanks very much.
Tony, it's up to you now.
Thanks. As I said in my intro, I don't have all the answers. But I think that in tackling, I guess, sort of youth crime particularly, is that what we need to do is not look at it in isolation. I think it's important to see it, I guess, sort of across a breadth of different areas. I mean, it's not just about incarceration, but it's also about prevention as well as rehabilitation, and if in the last resort there is obviously detention. I think that there are obviously some practical things that certainly that the community of Broome can feel, I suppose, safe, that we could do. I think as a council. One of the things is obviously increasing the Shire Rangers, particularly during our busy seasons when we see a whole influx of people. I think that's one of the areas that we can certainly look at. Also about funding, I guess, sort of community security patrols. I think we've seen certainly in other councils, particularly in the metropolitan area, where councils do fund those sorts of security patrols. Also, we have the HYPE patrols here, but
30 seconds, Tony.
Oh, sorry, that was very quick. Safe crisis housing for youth. I think we need to seriously look at the introduction of curfews for minors. That obviously requires a hell of a lot of debate. I think the other one is looking at respect for country, culture and self, where we've seen certainly the influx of visitors from outlying communities into Broome, and we know that that's been difficulty.
Thanks, Tony.
Crime is a complex issue, and tackling it will take collaboration, conviction, and the mobilisation of resources from across the spectrum of stakeholders. This includes the Shire, non-profits, state and federal governments. Imagine if the kids who wander our streets at night had a safe alternative. We have an opportunity to leverage funding allocated to the Kimberley Juvenile Justice Strategy to prioritise the development of a youth crisis accommodation centre. This would include developing the scope of the service, consideration of operational needs, ongoing funding requirements, and reviewing the overall impact on our town. Our community wants to prioritise solutions to youth crime, and I don't think it's unreasonable to expect the Shire to contribute some seed funding to this initiative. To support this crisis response, we also need preventative, diversionary and community development initiatives that address the underlying cause of crime. This means working with families and providing appropriate services and facilities for youth. Not every kid wants to play footy and basketball, so we need alternative means of engagement. Based on my discussions with the PCYC and police, I would like to see investment in a youth technology hub, which could be used as a reward tool for positive behaviour and an avenue for kids who simply don't otherwise have access to technology. Adding extra eyes on our streets at night through security night patrols will help. I also want to bring back the old school neighbourhood watch programs,
30
but
seconds, Ellen.
with a modern twist. We could create a mapping tool which enables people in real time to upload attempted break-ins or antisocial behaviour. This map could be accessed by both police and the community, so we can see in real time what is happening in our suburbs and mitigate accordingly. There is no silver bullet to solve this issue, but we need to start somewhere.
Well, I can certainly agree with my friends on the left here. And that's physically on the left here, sorry. My friends on the left here, in terms of there's no silver bullet. I mean, what's causing youth crime is something that's developed over many years, and the fear is that the issue is getting worse, not better. Now, there's a whole heap of reasons for that, but a lot of these issues are systemic. I think we have to be very, very cautious about coming up with band-aid solutions that will cost a significant amount of money and may not actually solve our particular problem here in Broome. Yes, in Halls Creek there are other diversionary tactics and other initiatives that the Shire has used there, but here in Broome we have a whole myriad of not-for-profits there that are focused on a whole region of social services that don't seem to be working well together, collaborating together. They're working in silos there, and I don't believe that they are achieving what they're very well funded to achieve. I think there's criticism coming about the Shire is only doing certain things. Now I think, and we don't have time in my 34 seconds to go through all of that, but clearly if people actually attend Shire meetings,
30 seconds.
actually have a look at the strategies in place, what is being done, they'll see there's a whole range of initiatives that are going on, support and resources going into the youth of Broome, as well as infrastructure which is solely directed at providing positive alternatives for children to get engaged with the community. So now I have to stop. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, I think we as a community in Broome would like to have the safety of our people in the community, safety in the home, safety with our children, but overall safety for the whole of the community in Broome. One of the things that I've been advocating to have done by the Kalari Patrol, which is partly funded by the state government, but also partly funded by the Shire on their running costs. But what I've been advocating is that we have patrols, 24-hour patrols. Our Aboriginal staff go out and do those patrols and just have a look around where the groups of people are gathering, but patrol that area 24/7. That hasn't come to fruition yet, but that's what I'll be advocating for, and I think to have that in place, I think it'll solve, and it's not going to be a band-aid thing. It'll be an ongoing fund from whoever is going to resource that, the Kalari Patrol. I think it'll solve some of the problem, but it's not going to be a Band-Aid thing. And what will happen is that hopefully people like yourself
15 seconds.
will have an input into that thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll actually get Alicia to read out Desiree's responses that she's emailed in. She couldn't be here tonight. And then she'll read out Harold's as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I just will reiterate that I'm here purely as a narrator. So this is Desiree's seat, and then I'll move over here for Harold's chair. All right. Desiree. Her response is, practical is a very important word here. There is a perception in the community that providing resources and infrastructure to reduce crime is the responsibility of the Shire. Resources and infrastructure initiatives to tackle the problem the entire community is facing is the responsibility of the government, predominantly state government. This is not something that falls into the responsibility of a local government and their ratepayers. The responsibility lies with the local government to advocate to government to provide resources and solutions to these very challenging issues. That why is the past 4 years. That is why. That is why in the past 4 years we have been doing exactly that, advocating very heavily for this assistance. Last December, the Shire of Broome held a community safety forum where we had members of Parliament in the room along with head of departments responsible for these issues to listen to the community and their concerns around this escalating situation. Following from that, we have been in regular contact with the Director General for the Department of Justice, Mr. Adam Thomason, in relation to this issue. In response to that, Mr. Thomason earlier this year held a forum with a vast range of organisations and stakeholders to come up with some ideas and solutions to tackling this issue. From that came a very strong need for an on-country facility for disengaged youth and youth already engaged in the justice system, along with a solution such as a safety house where police can take youth who are out on the streets at night committing offences. Both initiatives were provided funding in the last budget to commence business cases on such proposals, as well as funding for diversionary programs to further assist disengaged youth. We believe this is a great step forward and commitment from our lobbying efforts from the government to assist in these solutions. 4 seconds, Desiree. I am so sorry. You have another paragraph to go.
Well done, well done. You did well, thank you. And now we'll introduce Harold.
Never any good at character voices, but Harold's responses are a bit shorter, so we should get through them. All right. Okay. Harold's response is, I, along with our team, have already done a huge amount of work regarding crime reduction in Broome, which includes various initiatives that have been delivered over the last 4 years. However, unfortunately, a lot of the heavy lifting work gets done out of the public eye. I am very proud of being front and centre and deep in the trenches, lobbying, fighting, and calling the state to account across many fronts and various portfolios, from police to communities to justice and education. This has resulted in significant outcomes for our town and region. While the public may get the impression that nothing has been done, you only have to look at the last state budget with significant funding set aside for major changes and major projects to aid outcomes for sometimes very complex issues. And unfortunately, these changes don't happen overnight. However, make no mistake, they are not knee-jerk reactions brought about by social media opinions. These are real, and while maybe not perceived as practical to some, I will continue this fight and continue to deliver.
Thank you. Question 2 that we had come up was, if you are elected, what is going to change? And what will be the impact of your proposals on rates? James?
Thanks, Kylie. I'm going to be very upfront here and say that I promise to bring an environmental filter to all that I do on the Shire. I believe in the science of climate change, and I believe that this is the moment that we need to do something about it. I believe every level of government has a responsibility to the people to make every effort they can to combat climate change. and end their reliance upon fossil fuels. I've just read the recent IPCC Intergovernmental Report on Climate Change, 2021. Each of the major impacts there, so we're talking about the warming of the ocean, the CO2 emissions rising, and the total link between that and human behaviour, the acidification of the ocean, and the heat waves that are going to become increasingly hotter and stronger and longer, as well as the marine heat waves as well, which will kill all our fish, as well as the rising sea levels, which Broome is particularly susceptible to. I believe all those things are going to happen unless we do something about it now. I think Broome is also ideally situated to take the lead in dealing with these issues. We're a small town in the middle of nowhere, and we can do a whole range of things that can change this. So I'm talking about engaging community renewables, the use of reduce of plastics, the decarbonisation of our economy, and in the planning and regulation of our housing. All those things are things that Shire can actually do, lead, and engage communities to do. I believe in that in doing this, it will reduce rates. Not only will it reduce rates, it will reduce your power costs. Not only will it reduce your power costs, but it will reduce your insurance costs. It will also reduce the amount of money the Shire is currently having to spend on the trying to deal with some of the issues of climate change, which are already having to do. So I think there will be a reduction in all those things. So it's a no-brainer for me. We need to move into the 21st century.
Thanks, James. It's all yours, Tony.
For me, it is about giving a genuine voice to our diverse community in decisions and future developments of our town, our Shire. Bringing our diverse community together and celebrating and honouring our peoples, our rich heritage, cultural heritage, our unique environment, and our built and industrial heritage. A place that we can all be proud of to call home. To ensure that any future developments are through multiple lenses: culture, social, environment, and economic. That future developments are sustainable, and that the benefits and enjoyment as such are spread across a broad spectrum of our community. Example, I'll give you an example, our World Heritage dinosaur tracks. Have it embedded in our school's curriculum. TAFE conservation and ranger training, university partners for paleontology degrees and research, a world-class interactive centre, and a Jurassic Park virtual reality. And why not a dinosaur festival? We have such rich heritage here. I would hope that rates would not increase. However, I believe that if they are planned initiatives that might impact on rates,
30
that
seconds.
the ratepayers have a clear understanding of why. I would hope that the future focus of council would change. Obviously, I would be one of 9 councillors, so this obviously requires negotiation. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you. I actually found this to be a really broad question because there's so many variables that can come into play. But ultimately, the change I want to see is a Shire which has a greater focus on community, a focus on the people who live here. I want to see investment in initiatives which reflect the priorities of the community. Ironically, the Shire has actually done some excellent consultation on what the community's key concerns and issues are. Through this consultation, the community identified youth facilities and services, community safety and security, and a safe boat launching facility as their top 3 priorities. I have no intention of increasing rates in order to achieve those priorities. With a responsible and strategic approach to investment, strong advocacy and lobbying to state and federal governments, I believe we can meet the needs of the community commensurate with the current levels of expenditure. I would like to see greater transparency between elected members, the Shire, ratepayers and residents to ensure the community know and understand how their rates are being distributed. Thank you.
I'm I'm a bit perplexed because I must be living in a different town where we talk about focus on consultation, focus on working with the people of Broome. I think all of that is happening now. And although I haven't got the figures in front of me, in everything we have done here, I could point to the whole raft of consultation with key stakeholders, workshops, public workshops that have taken place, where the Shire has been down at the markets, they've been down at the Thursday night markets there, trying to engage more and more people into what we're doing. Every one of you here, I hope, is already on the Shire's email list. It's easy to apply, and you will be emailed with everything that's going on. The transparency that's available and the governance that is required under local government is at such a level that anyone who cares to be interested in what's going on can clearly and easily find that. All that information is there, is published every month, every dollar that is spent. Now, I'm sorry if I feel passionate tonight, but I know the current councillors do a tremendous job in ensuring that any funds are expended are done in a planned way and after lots of consideration. So it's very easy to talk about, oh, we'll do this or we'll do that. But these things actually have to be done in a coherent, planned, strategic way to a budget. So, okay.
Thanks,
Now I've
Peter.
got
Oh, you're
6
lucky.
seconds left.
Yeah. Oh, did you?
Oh, well, thank you, but anyway.
What was that noise then? Sorry, I cut you off 2 seconds. Did you want that? Are you sure? Sorry about that. I heard a noise.
All right. In regard to arts and culture in the community, I think
About if you're elected, what is going to change and what will be the impact of your proposals on rates?
on rates.
Yeah, so the rates. Sorry.
Well, I've been advocating since I'm on council. I've been advocating to have the rates lower, and much lower than the 2.5% CPI, and I intend to advocate to keep it down even lower than that. I've advocated to have it 1.5 of for this year, but there were some other important things that council and wanted to do. So, and the finance department, they came up with a 1.78%, I think, to have it passed on to the ratepayers for this year. But I'll continue advocating for lower than that, if that's possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. Desiree this time? Yep.
Desiree.
So we have Desiree. Desiree's responses.
Okay, question 2. If re-elected, I will be continuing the plans and projects which Council have already endorsed in our strategic community plan and our corporate business plan, which endorses keeping rates under 2%. We've achieved this over the past 5 years, with this current year at 1.83%. Given the record capital expenditure that has occurred, it is very commendable and a direct result of sound financial management.
1 minute, 32 seconds left. No,
that
you're
was
right,
short,
thank
short
you.
and sweet from Desiree.
And we've got
Yeah.
Harold's response.
All right. Harold, on question 2. Interesting question. We have over the journey worked hard, councillors and staff alike, to map out our future through many different strategies, long-term financial and asset management plans that have and will continue to deliver great outcomes for the town of Broome. However, we have much more to do as far as change. Everything will continue to evolve to make Broome the most livable regional centre in Australia, which will give everyone the opportunity to call Broome home if they wish. And I, for one, a person who was born here, grew up here and raised my family here, welcome that. As we have demonstrated in the last 5 years, we have managed to go through the biggest investment in infrastructure, public open space and revitalisation in Broom's history. This has also resulted in significant government and private sector investment in the town, as all sectors' confidence in our town continues to soar. All of this while working hard to reduce the ridiculous rate hikes that we faced several years ago to achieve the record low rates we have today.
Thank you. So question 3, what is your plan to address the needs for affordable housing, including flexible options for seasonal and FIFO workers? Do you want to mix it up or do you want to go first?
I'm here.
Okay, it's all yours, James.
Thanks, Kylie. Once looking upon the Shire website today to look at the what's there for housing, I've noticed that they're having a monthly meeting in regards to the current housing crisis. Whilst other councils across the Western Australia and Australia are focusing on producing housing strategies that look at issues such as sustainability, affordability, and how to grow a housing market that meets the needs of the modern Australian community. So basically we're moving to smaller houses for smaller numbers of people in family. I suppose this isn't going to be something that's very interesting for people with skin in the game in the industry, but it definitely is an issue here that we need to be taking on board. In particular, from our meetings we've been having in the community, where a lot of the older members of our community are saying, where are we going to go next? We definitely need a housing strategy that looks at where older people go to, older people from our community. I know that there's a lack of 1 or 2 bedroom properties in this town, and this is an issue for single people living here, for people wanting to escape dysfunctional relationships, for people who are FIFO workers, and again for our older people in the community. Flexible housing options are also important for our FIFO workers as well, and this can be achieved through having a housing register kept by the Shire to enable people to share a house, to rent a room from in a home, or for residents to be able to offer their house up for sharing or for house sitting. I think there's multiple areas that we can look at here, and a housing strategy is exactly what we need right now.
Thanks, James.
This issue is multi-layered, especially the one of affordable housing. There is social housing, private rentals, that is corporates and government workers, and home ownership, pressure on the market and availability. The impacts are felt across the board, including for seasonal workers. I think that it would be important to look at whether Shire building regulations are a contributing factor, and if so, what can be done to improve that. Greater advocacy for social housing obviously is an important one, as well as design and innovation of particular demographics, such as older people, youth. This might include such innovation as tiny houses, granny flats, etc. And facilitating maybe workers' hostels and or villages. Thank you.
Interestingly, as part of my day job, just last week I was chatting to the Director of Land Use Planning at the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage around opportunities to reduce red tape and fast-track builds for new accommodation, specifically around accommodation for seasonal workers. So under the, and I apologise, this is a very legislative heavy answer, under the planning and development regulations, there are actually provisions which enable local government to enact exemptions through local planning policies. For example, an exemption applied by local government may remove the need to seek planning approval for certain developments. This could be applied to accommodation proposed on agricultural land or for the purposes of staff servicing the hospitality and tourism industry, for example. There are also special planning provisions under the COVID state of emergency, which provide the Minister for Planning with the ability to issue a notice to temporarily exempt planning requirements of local planning schemes if it's considered necessary to assist with COVID recovery. So there's very real measures that we can take right now to be able to reduce the red tape and make it easier to apply greater flexibility to the way in which we assess development proposals. And through that, we can increase the volume and of available accommodation options, such as tiny homes and granny flats, and improve affordability for housing in our town.
Okay. They seem to be things that basically are going to take a long time to fix. The problem is that over the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a whole heap of social housing in Broome that's been demolished and it hasn't been replaced. That's created a huge shortage of property. If you haven't recognised that we've basically come out of almost a 10-year lack of growth in Broome, where housing prices have gone down to the stage where it's been cheaper to buy an established home than actually build one. So really over the last 10 years, there's been almost a handful of new houses built each year. That has contributed to the current situation we have. The Shire already has the ability, and it's planning there, to approve granny flats in most blocks, depending on the size of them there. I guess I'm not sure that I'm in favour of getting rid of planning laws, even for a short period of time. They are there for a specific reason. And again, that is not our problem. We actually have lots and lots of land available now for people to buy. It's probably at the most affordable rate it's been in a long time. The interest rates are as low as they've ever been. The big issue at the moment
30
is
seconds.
lack of tradespeople to actually build houses and lack of materials. And the cost of those materials is going up through COVID and other things. It's not because of planning issues.
Well, I concur with Tony and what he has said. I think it's a way forward. I just when you talk about appropriate housing, and I'm not talking about Aboriginal people. When they talk about appropriate houses, it's not. They want what Mr. Smith has got next door to them. It's not what the government has proposed at 1 Mile and at Kennedy Hill. The first one was the 1 Mile one, where the government proposed to put housing in there. And what they did, they put, and they said it's appropriate for those Aboriginal families to go in there. They built a 2-bedroom home, all the facilities outside, a communal kitchen outside, not in the home, outside, and the families had a cook there, and they call that appropriate housing. So I ask you people today, what do you call appropriate houses for our Aboriginal community people? I know today's Aboriginal people want to go into a home that's got all the facilities that we have in our own houses. Air conditioning, fans, electric,
30
power,
seconds.
water, all that sort of thing that they want. That'll keep them into the home, and that'll stop all the other, hopefully it'll stop all the other social problems that they have in the community. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, Desiree's response to question 3 is, Shire of Broome, as a direct response to these issues, commenced a monthly housing crisis roundtable which involved major stakeholders that do and can have influence to solutions to these issues. These members are the Shire of Broome, NBY, Foundation Housing, Development WA, Department of Housing, KDC, Department of Communities, Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, and Broome International Airport. Through these discussions, we have had members of that group come up with solutions including development of lots, fast-tracked in the next 12 to 18 months that will provide immediate housing solutions. Discussions with Development WA re land at reduced rates, Foundation Housing potentially partnering with the Shire and McMahon Estate to provide reduced cost housing under the Foundation Housing model. The Shire in its own right is looking at options for developing a parcel of land of which we have a management order over in order to accommodate key worker accommodation solutions. Right. Just moving to Harold. All right, question number 3, Harold's response. We will continue to work at being innovative, and an example such as the McMahon Oval Master Plan is testament to that. This project will provide aged care housing, social housing, Shire staff housing and much needed public open space. Not only seasonal and FIFO workers, but also workers in the hospitality and construction sector are all challenged when it comes to housing. We are already in the process of addressing these issues, which by the way has been on our radar over the last couple of years. I believe we need to have some flexibility in the short term to be able to address these shortages, but also sound planning for the future. We have plenty of land across several estates. The question is the time to get more houses on the ground. And that's Harold.
Thank you, guys. So question 4, we're actually going to get this response from Peter to start with, and then we'll work that way, just to change it up a little bit.
Mixing it up? All right, Peter, are
let's
you ready?
mix it up. Question 4, what is the Shire's role in supporting tourism, and what will you advocate for?
I guess tourism really touches on everything we do in Broome. Basically every activity in Broome, every business in Broome, the facilities we have here, the doctors, the dentists, the hospital, our car parking, plus the resorts. It impacts the scheduled flights that we come in, the costs of our flights. It is a huge part of Broome, but it's not the only thing in Broome. I challenge to say that basically everything the Shire does is actually focused on the people of Broome. They're the people that are consulted on all of these issues and consulted extensively. All of the, I guess the infrastructure that's been put in Broome has been for the people of Broome. Whether it's Town Beach, whether it's Chinatown, whether it's the new skate park, whether it's the proposed Cable Beach redevelopment, all those things are for the people of Broome, the community of Broome. But they are also very, very attractive to tourists that come here. And let's face it, a lot of, I guess, people in Broome do rely on the tourist industry. So I don't think we're over-focused, but I think it can actually appear that way. So specifically, what are we going to do? We have a differential rate system where we take additional...
30 seconds.
Thank you. 28 seconds. Additional rates of commercial and industrial properties there to be able to fund supporting the tourist industry. Now that basically goes into helping the BBC, which does an absolutely tremendous job for the whole community through the supporting the tourist section. Also goes to help A&W sometimes there. So yes, it's important. We do support it, but we support
Thanks,
it by
Peter.
supporting the people first.
Thank you.
I concur with Peter. I think that's where the Shire is heading. Tourism would be one of the biggest industry it's happening, and it's happening right around the country, but also it's happening in our region, in Western Australia, and especially the Kimberleys. And I think mainly we have to concentrate on sort of that, because Broome hasn't got other industries that will support this community. So tourism is one of the biggest thing that we should be concentrating on, and the benefits from those sort of development will attract people, industry, people, tourists coming in. The people will benefit out of that, and the long-term things that I see would happen, the population will grow, and more infrastructure will happen, and families will start calling Broome their home. That's it.
Wow, churning through the questions is really good. It's fantastic. All right, question number 4 from Desiree. Her response is, Broome, which we all know, has businesses that directly rely on tourism. The Shire is very supportive of this sector, as I am personally. Tourism operators currently pay a differential rate on their rate in the dollar to raise funds to go towards promoting and supporting tourism. Whether that be through destination marketing or visitor servicing or tourism activities, we have an ongoing obligation to strongly support this industry and all our operators within it. These operators have suffered significantly over the past 5+ years, with finally having this past year producing a positive return for most. I will continue to advocate to support this industry and provide funding and/or initiatives that will benefit the entire industry. One successful example of this being our ongoing lobbying efforts with the Premier and Minister Papalia at the time for reduced flights to Broome, which we now all enjoy, including our tourism sector. That's from Desiree. And Harold's hot seat. Question number 4. This one looks short and sweet to the point. Okay, Harold. I will leave this to the candidates that are challenging this election. I believe the residents are under no illusion as to where I stand on my own and our Shire's support and continuing support of tourism in our town. That's Harold. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll just take it over to James now,
Okay.
if we could.
All right. Back down to the end. Here you go.
Thanks, James.
Tourism is an essential part of the Broome economy, and this will likely to continue to grow, especially if international travel is impacted by COVID. The Shire has a role in ensuring that tourism is supported through the support of local businesses and innovation in the sector, especially in undeveloped areas like Indigenous tourism, dinosaur footprints, the arts, and in promotion to the Broome's amazing history and culture. However, for me, the most valuable and essential role the Shire can play in tourism is the protection and promotion of our incredible environment. For thousands of years, traditional custodians, the Yarra and Juukan people, have looked after this land so that we can all enjoy its beauty and bounty today. This is a role the Shire must uphold, and I will ensure that every decision that comes before me has an environmental filter applied to it. I believe at present the best way we can support tourism is to provide the physical environment that can be enjoyed without the trappings of the Gold Coast of high-rise development and car parks heading the town up, in a civic life where residents feel amenity, feel safe, protected, welcomed and nurtured in such a way and such that tourists and locals alike can feel safe walking the streets at night and having their doors and windows open at home. On that note, I also believe the ongoing issues at Mail Oval need to be dealt with. This severely impacts tourism, and at a certain extent town and town beach. They must be dealt with. It's a terrible look, and it's a terrible way for people to be living their lives. It's been going on for too long, and we need to find solutions to this and work with the Yaru, the Department of Communities and the police and all other agencies to deal with this issue of the people of the on the Oval. Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Thanks. The Shire has an important role, not only in terms of advocacy and promotion of our tourism industry, but also in its sustainable development. I believe that the Shire is there to provide strategic leadership, planning and thinking in its future development, to diversify our tourism industry. And I think it's more than just the tourism industry. It is about looking much broadly at what Broome offers. So as James said, I think our unique cultures here, our heritage, environment, industries, etc., such as our Indigenous cultures, art, dance, song, etc., that we could develop even more. Our World Heritage dinosaur tracks, as I've mentioned earlier, our migratory wader birds, our snub-fin dolphins and migratory whales. It's not just about coming here just to see them, but to expand that so that there is also the education that goes with that, so that we have here the study of ornithology to degree level where our children can then, be taught that in school, but that they then have more than just, or have to go away, that they can study those things here, paleontology, ornithology. So that's the expansion
30
that we
seconds.
start to look at in terms of our industries here and our natural and built history that we have here. We can expand upon that. The migratory birds, we can have the sister city relationships with those cities where those birds go to, but also is to have the research, etc. So I think there's more we can do in this space and much broader than just tourism.
Tourism is the backbone of Broom's economy, and it's essential that the Shire supports it accordingly. Tony and I actually met with the Broome Visitor Centre earlier this week to discuss the essential service that they provide to both tourism businesses and the community. Every year, the Visitor Centre has to apply for funding from the Shire. This is inefficient and unproductive. They're seeking a 3-year Memorandum of Understanding for ongoing financial security, and something which I would support. We also need to think creatively about an alternative revenue stream for the Broome Visitor Centre so they can gain financial independence. Interestingly, we were told from the Visitors Centre that they're unclear as to where the differential rates the Shire charges to tourism properties actually ends up. So the quarantining of differential rates was negotiated by the former CEO of the Kimberley Tourism Association, which is now Australia's Northwest, to support destination marketing. So to me, it seems that the Shire needs to improve its transparency around where these rates now go. I support the need for a boat ramp to provide safe boat launching facilities for our community. And together with that, we actually have this amazing world-class recreational fishery on our doorstep, with sailfish caught and released in record numbers. An appropriate boat launching facility would provide an opportunity for our town to attract international anglers and diversify our tourism economy. I
30
also
seconds.
think we need to do better to support the establishment of new and the enhancement of existing cultural tourism opportunities, both within Broome, but particularly along the Dampier Peninsula. We have the world's oldest living culture living right here, and it's something we need to celebrate and share. Thank you.
Thank you. So our final question, and then we might be able to open it up to the floor as well. We're going to start with Harold this time.
Thank you very much.
How would you describe the role and the value of the arts in the Shire of Broome? What is your vision for supporting arts and culture in the next 5 years?
All right, thank you. All right, Harold's response is, I have many times over the last 8 years publicly admitted that I was a bit of an art ignoramus. However, I have enjoyed the journey of education in all aspects of art and probably one of its biggest supporters. I believe the true value to all community members is probably not realised. So I think we need to do some more work in that space to invest not only in the arts, but in getting our community along for the ride. It's critical that we all have ownership. Thank you, Harold.
And to Desiree.
Thank you.
You're doing well, you're doing well.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, now, Desiree's response to question number 5 is, arts, heritage and culture make up a very large, important fabric in Broome. I have always supported and will continue to support the arts and our heritage and culture. Demonstration of that is the significant art that has been a big part of our revitalisation of Chinatown, through different cultural groups creating amazing art pieces that create character and celebrate our heritage, and through art tells the story of our history. Council is currently working on revisiting and adopting an arts and culture strategy that will further reiterate our commitment and goals in this area. Thank you, Desiree.
Thank you. Philip, your turn.
Well, in regards to the arts and culture, I'm right behind having something developed in the community, such as an infrastructure. I think council and Yambabura Yaru is working towards having an establishment for arts and culture. I'm not too sure when it's going to happen, but I hope it's going to happen in the next 4 years. If I'm elected, I'll push for that. But we have current councillors sitting in here that have been pushing for arts and culture, and they're really passionate about the arts. Councillor Nick Weavers and Councillor Foy, who are sitting in the forum tonight, they were passionate and pushing the arts and trying to get all those arts around the Broome area and outside the Broome area to come back into Broome, so we can set up the arts and crafts or arts and culture centre in Broome.
Other way, Philip. See, I'm just trying to keep you on your toes.
Hi, look, I'm lucky enough to remember 25, 30 years ago when I first came to Broome, they used to call it the New Orleans of Australia. There was such a vibrant art and performance sector here. There was almost any night of the week you could go out. There were clubs and there were individual people sort of setting up in coffee shops in the evening, and it was one of the things that really really blew me away about Broome, and I guess part of the reason that we decided to actually stay here. It's the time when Broome had its mojo, and I think that's been lost over the last few years. And I know that the arts and sort of cultural sector here is going to play a major part in Broome getting its mojo back in terms of, I guess, that vibrancy that a strong art sector and resourcing in town makes. I don't know what the answer is, but I know that all of the current councillors are right behind Councillor Weavers, who's particularly asked for, I guess, our strategy to be reviewed and some wider consultation on that, because I think it's a critical part of the actual fabric and vibrancy of Broome that we actually need to continue to make this a very strong and
30 seconds or
inclusive
28.
community. That's all.
Mixing it up, Peter. See, you went the wrong way as well then. Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you. I believe that Broome well and truly punches above its weight in culture and the arts. We have such a rich tapestry of culture in Broome, which we don't showcase nearly enough. Our visual and performing artists are incredible, including all those who work in production behind the scenes. As a consequence of COVID, we've seen some world-class performers frequent Broome. It would be great to recognise this and better merge this talent with our local offerings. We need to provide more sustainable funding for the current arts programs that are run in Broome, as well as establish new means of showcasing our talent. I'm not sure if you saw Mr. Mark McGowan turning the soil on a new creative industries hub a few weeks ago. And guess where it was? In Geraldton, of all places. No offence to our friends in the Midwest, but how is Geraldton getting a creative industries hub and Broome isn't? Arts and culture touches so many elements of our lives. It challenges us, creates connection, and will provide for economic development through associated tourism if managed and promoted correctly. I would like to see the Shire advocating for a culture and creativity hub in Broome, something which brings together our diversity and celebrates it through art.
I think there's probably a lot of agreement on a number of things here. So yeah, I totally agree that the arts are extremely important, and it is intrinsic to the culture, social, environmental and economic fabric of Broome. It is vital in the development and growth of Broome, there needs to be an arts and culture developed and driven vision and plan for the Shire of Broome. That's extremely important. We need to increase and invest resources to the arts and culture in partnership with the Shire's art and culture groups and stakeholders. And together with the arts sector, I think we need to advocate for financial and infrastructure resources from the private sector, philanthropists, state and federal governments. I think also is that what we need to do is look not only just in terms of the performance, but I think also in the education and training, to see it as pathways for children. I went to a performance about a month ago that the Sandfly Circus put on, and the children in that. And why can't we have those partnerships with the likes of, whether it's WAP or whether it's with NASDA or those sorts of bodies, training arts bodies. So I think that we need to look beyond just those, if I can say, amateur performances here. And I agree that there needs to be an arts and culture precinct. Now that precinct could be across a number of different locations here in Broome, but I think that we should have that here in Broome, because the arts and culture, as we know, is extremely important. It really is so vibrant here in Broome. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Tony. Ellen already said we're punching well above our weight here in Broome. We've got a long history of excellence in the arts. I don't believe this is capitalised enough, in particular to tourists who often complain there's nothing to do here at night. I'd love to have been here in the St Louis days. That would have been quite something. When I first came here 15 years ago, there was bands almost every night, and we had international and national bands starting their tours here or ending their tours here. So it really was a vibrant place. That's changed. At the moment, really the best we've got is Brand New Day at Sun Pictures, which is good enough. That's good. But wouldn't it be great if we had live shows being performed weekly with our own local performers, doing our own town stories? I also think that the arts provides many people with enjoyment and fulfilment, which leads to a greater enjoyment of their own lives here in town. A way to meet people, to get to know each other. It's the same with sport, really, which is very all catered for in town. In any group setting, there's a built-in support group that can be often make the difference in someone's life at a time when they need it. I believe we need to support the arts as a Shire through reinstating the provision of public art policy back to where it began, at 1% over 2 million. It's been reduced to 0.5% over 5 million. We hardly see any of it. Yet we've seen this wonderful sculpture in the middle of the town that drew massive crowds, and it's going to happen year after year after year. I also personally committed to getting another Stomping Ground event happening, and I think this could perhaps be a yearly or a 2-yearly event. Why don't we have a music festival here? We have the best weather, and we have a basically unused facility down at Ganthian Point called the Broome Turf Club, which would be a perfect venue for that. I committed to do something about Stomping Ground in the future, even if not elected.
20 seconds,
it's something
sorry.
I'll be working on in the future. I believe that if we could make sure this happens before or after Shinju, we'd be extending our tourist season by at least a couple of weeks. Thanks very much.
Thank you, James. So there were some really, really good answers there from all of the candidates, I think. What we're going to do now is we actually are going to open it up to the floor. So I have no doubt there's a fair few questions that are going to be coming. Now, I do want to say, though, please make sure... Yep. Now, 6:30? Yep. Okay. Yep, no worries. Thanks, Tony. So we will just have a couple of questions from the crowds, and I do want to just make sure that we remember my main rules as well, okay? So the questions that you're asking go to all the candidates, not individual candidates. They are a generic question about your topic that you want to ask. Any belittling, any finger pointing, any arguing, the microphone will be taken off you and I will step in. Pretty much simple as that. Do we understand? Yes, Kylie. Awesome. Thank you very much. And anyone have a question? Chris.
Are we on? Yes, here we go.
Thank you, Harold or Desiree, whatever the case may be. My question is specifically about public art, and James has already touched on the answer a bit, but I just want to provide a bit of a context to the question so people can understand it a bit more. So the Shire of Broome introduced a policy around public art, I think about 15 years ago, which was a developer's contribution, and it set a rate at 1% for developers with projects over the value of 2 million. So a developer developing a project at 2 million could choose to invest 1% of that value into public art on their own premises, or if they didn't want to do that, they could contribute 1% of the value to a Shire fund to create public art for the Shire. That fund was running for about 10 years and it raised almost $200,000. And then at some point, more recently, I think about 3 years ago, Council decided that it would cut that rate. First of all, Council wanted to end that policy altogether, to get rid of it, and then it decided to cut the rate from 1% to 0.5% on developments over 5 million, and it's effectively raised nothing since that happened. The big sculpture in the roundabout in Chinatown was funded largely through that developer's contribution. And there's been a lot more public art through Chinatown and into Town Beach that's been funded by the royalties for regions in the major infrastructure funding. And I think lots of people in Broome have had epiphanies about the value of public art, including our Shire President, who's gone from a self-proclaimed ignoramus on art to now being the Shire's most active advocate for public art. So quite an amazing turnaround.
Chris, do you have a question as well for the
I do.
candidate?
So my
Thank
question
you.
is, given that this is quite a common thing across shires, across WA, that they have developer contributions at a set rate, would the candidates support returning the rate to 1% or possibly even higher, but certainly would candidates support Shire conducting a review across WA to see what other shires' rates are, and would they support increasing the current rate?
So basically we're asking if they will increase the current rate that the Shire have at the moment for the visual arts.
To increase it from 0.5% and to lower the value at which it's applied.
Okay. Did anybody want to answer that one from the panel? Yep. Sorry, we haven't got a mic. Oh, you have to use mine. We've only got two. Sorry, that's what I'm going, yeah, and? Do.
Thank you. Whoa, goodness me. So my first response to that is that the building and construction industry has an existing levy that goes into the Construction Futures Fund, which is 0.2% for every development project over $20,000, I believe. And that goes in, that's statewide. So my initial reaction is to think, well, can we approach state government and the Construction Futures Levy and their board and actually ask them if a proportion of that can go into public arts statewide? But aside from that, I think I'm not sure as to the rationale as to why the Shire might have reduced the rate beforehand, but my thinking is obviously we're into a boom cycle with building, and perhaps there is certainly merit in reviewing it and considering an increase.
Chris, why would I have thought you would have asked this question? Look, it's a very good question, but again, some historical context. Obviously, it was at a higher rate when there was substantial commercial industrial development going on. And although I was non-Shire at the time, I do certainly recall that there was pushes to reduce it because the amount of commercial development and the ability for people to raise funds to do that was getting harder and harder. So to add another impost on at that time was considered unhelpful. Now, most of you have been here a long time. You will have seen there is virtually no commercial development in Broome, probably for the last 10 years. and there's little commercial development now. What you're seeing is residential, because basically the costs of land, the cost of building commercial properties at the moment versus the rate that a developer can get means we're not likely to see any commercial property for some time. So I would warn about re-implementing that and raising that until such time as there is a significant increase in commercial development, because it's pretty tough at the moment out there. But great idea. But I mean, I put the question is, why should it just be developers? Why shouldn't it be on new houses? No. But the other thing is, even during that time, when basically we haven't had that, look at the public art that has been put into Broome, and that's actually been paid by the taxpayer, not the developers.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Any other questions from the floor? Yeah, we've got a lady.
Teresa Civisato. I live on the outskirts of Broome, I shall call it. It's out at Morrill Park. Now, with all this traffic, especially during tourists, as we go home, we're sitting on the middle of the road, giving way to cars passing us on the left-hand side at 90 k's. One day there's going to be a serious accident, and I'm speaking from the caravan park way out past Millie. Would the Shire ever look into making bypass roads, please?
Okay, does anyone want to answer that one about will the Shire look into making bypass roads out near Morrell Park, is it? From the caravan park out on the Broome High.
Look, it's a good question, and obviously there appears to be a significant traffic problem there, but I'll stand corrected. But that is, I think, a main roads problem, not a Shire problem. Now, that doesn't mean if that problem is there, the Shire couldn't discuss and advocate with the main roads, but I guess there would need to be their input into it to fix that problem. And maybe a bypass is a solution, I don't know. But I'd suggest if it's a current issue, you actually write to the Shire with that, and then I'm sure it can be looked at. You could do both, whichever.
On a personal note, I recommend doing both, yourself and then going getting some friends as well and people out there. James?
That's okay. Thanks, Teresa. And it sounds very reasonable what Peter's said. I also think maybe we need to look at a speed reduction for that stretch of road. If we took it down to 70 like the rest of Gubbinge, then that might help for a bit. And certainly it could be a temporary solution until something major's done there. But if you're thinking it's dangerous, it certainly sounds like it is. Maybe some widening and maybe some speed reduction might be like a practical solution there.
Thanks, Teresa. Philip?
Teresa, some years ago, before they actually sealed the road going into Morrell Park, where your home is, they were talking about a bypass road then. But I'm not too sure what happened to it, because the bypass road was coming alongside the Great Northern, then join up further down to where the fire area is, now fire brigade offices are now. That's where it is going now. But that would have taken some of the people's property, or whether it go onto the verge, and because the verge is about 40 metres wide, maybe it should have gone there. But there was plans for doing that, but I don't think it eventuated. Now you've come up with it, maybe the Shire, through the Shire staff, engineering, could have a look at it and see how they could accommodate that in conjunction with the Main Roads Department.
Thanks, Philip. Any other questions from the floor? We've got time for one more. Michael. Hang on a sec, microphone's coming.
Thanks for that. Tonight there's been a fair bit of comment about representation, consultation and representing the people of the community. One of the issues that I have is this term called stakeholder and consultation. Many times you hear activities occurring and the Shire says, we've consulted with key stakeholders. Like, for example, I'm in the tourism industry. They go and talk to A&W in the visitor centre, who have not spoken to their members about an issue, but they get feedback on that issue. Or they might go and speak to the Chamber of Commerce for a business issue, and they give an opinion, but that isn't an opinion that's been sought from their members. You spoke briefly about the housing roundtable, where it's key stakeholders again, so-called at this table, talking about housing issues. To me, there seems to be a lot of people from organisations who they walk into a room, they take off one hat from one organisation, put on another hat and say they represent a different organisation and a different section of the community, and they're providing advice as stakeholders in regards to issues in front of the Shire. So my question is, what do you propose as potential councillors in ensuring that we don't get the same stakeholders who drink from the same Kool-Aid fountain, putting the same ideas forward for different solutions? How can you actually get really true representation of the community's opinions in various issues?
Thanks, Michael. That's a very good question. Anybody? James?
Thanks for your question, Michael. I totally agree. That's one of the reasons I'm running tonight, is because I believe I provide a voice from the community. I don't have conflicts of interest that will prevent me from attending any part of the Shire meeting. I haven't got my snout in any trough around town. I'm representing myself and the people that I represent. One of my issues has been, and having worked with the Shire, I've seen it face to face, has been the picking of people to provide responses to questions and to provide stakeholder advice. And I will mention the Broome Futures when I talk about this, because for me that was a quango developed to provide answers to questions that we already knew where the answers were. So yeah, I will definitely be making sure that we have representation. I also think the Shire has failed in getting into the community and talking to people. There are a lot of people out there, and this hasn't come from me, this has been what I've been hearing from people, is that they're dissatisfied with a lot of the Shire has been doing, that there's not a focus on the community. I don't necessarily share that view, but it's definitely an attitude out there, and I believe that's from not being able to penetrate into the community to find out what people are really thinking and really feeling. So I will definitely be wanting to bring that to my councillorship, and I believe that I'm the right person to do that. I know a lot of people around town in lots of different areas, perhaps not at the elite top of the town, but everywhere else. Thank you.
Testing. Yeah, thanks very much for the question. I work for state government as my day job, and similarly I think state government as a whole gets a very similar, or tarred with the same brush, so to speak, around an inability to engage with stakeholders effectively. I would like to think that there's a best practice consultation framework out there somewhere, and certainly it wouldn't include going back to the same people again and again and seeking a diversity of representation. I think there must be an innovative way to seek community feedback on things, which enables people to tap in and get more information if they need it, or take a broad brush approach and I guess indicate their support or otherwise. I mean, there's plenty of apps out there that can do this sort of thing. So I think we need to take an innovative approach to how we consult with the community. I do think that the Shire's doing some good things. You know, they've got their staff down at Town Beach. They certainly publish a lot of material, and there is a degree of responsibility, I think, that falls on the people of the town to also engage in that information. And likewise, if you feel that you're not being adequately represented by your industry bodies, then you need to be approaching them to tell them that, you know, they need to step up their game to adequately represent you. But, you know, equally, I totally get where you're coming from, that we have a lot of people that wear many hats and they're the go-to people because it's the easy option. I don't think we should do things because it's the easy option. I think we need to follow due process so that we can get the best outcome, which represents the diversity of our community.
I think if the community wants to be involved, I think it's about communications, how we communicate, how local government communicates to the wider public, and how the wider public communicates back to the Shire. But I've always asked the question about how do we communicate to the wider community, and it's all the response I get back. I've spoken to the wider community and the stakeholders and other people that are interested in the project or whatever the council is trying to develop. That's the sort of information I get back from the officers. So I don't know whether you, as community members, are getting that information. It sounds like you're not getting that information and you're not responding. The best survey I've saw that came out when the Shire put a survey out for the cemetery, and we had a lot of response in the survey, and what the survey did is like prioritise what should happen in the Broome Cemetery, and the priorities. They set the
20
community
seconds.
set the priorities in that. So that's one of the best surveys I've seen, and something like that should happen when we are trying to do something in our town. Thank you.
All right, consultation, collaboration, very difficult. The Shire does have a framework. It has a very extensive framework, and I think it puts in a fair bit of effort into finding people who are prepared to actually come on board to working groups, etc., so we can get that grassroots feedback straight into council. There's a classic example that's just happened. The biggest issue we know, or we think in town, is certainly community safety, revolving around crime and use there. So the Shire, over a period last year, put together a proposed strategic plan, and as part of that strategic plan to deal with community safety, it endorsed a working group. So the working group went out, the Shire went out to stakeholders, to the community, advertised widely, went down to Town Beach several times, went to the markets, went up to the boulevard, put it in the newspaper, etc., asking for some representatives from the community to join this working group. The Shire
30
got
seconds.
3 responses to that. And there was one more that came in after the closing date. And the Shire, or the council actually said, well, we don't mind, just include that because we want further connections into the community. So it's a two-way thing. And that's just a classic example, I think, where the Shire has gone out of its way on one of the key issues, yet the response back from the community, we had 3 people.
Thanks, Peter. Alrighty, so that is all the time we have for tonight. Thank you all very, very much for coming down, and definitely thank you guys, all the candidates that are running as well. We do have a couple of drinks and a little bit of nibbles if you want to hang around and have a drink. Some of the candidates do have to go off to Kimberley Girl, which tickets are still on sale at the door, but I'm not sure how much, but you can, $10 at the door. So if you do want to head over there, just across the road. Otherwise, feel free to have a drink, and we'll let you know when we have to lock the doors. Thank you very much.